All right. Can you still see my screen? Okay, looks like it. All right, we're going to talk about Unit 7 root folder setups. They're exactly the same as Units 5 and 6, but there's a new subfolder that's going to become consistent with your pages now that we have all three of the main front-end languages. We've got HTML, JavaScript, and CSS all working together to create a more dynamic web page here. So let's start off with that. If you open up your File Explorer, you guys should be following along with me at this point. We're going to find our way to our second period web design OneDrive folder so that everything is nice and backed up. I have mine grouped by type. So if you want your File Explorer to look like mine, you can go to View and then change the group by on this tab right here. Change that to group by type, and that's going to separate your zips, your archives, your PDFs, and all of your folders. So it's really easy to find the specific thing that you're looking for. But we're going to do our basic root folder setup for Unit 7 because now assignment 7.1 is live, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. So I'm going to do the usual Canvas naming scheme. Everything is the same, except for now we're going to have a scripts subfolder inside of our Unit 7 root. That's going to line up nicely with Units 5 and 6 here. So we double click on that, create a new folder. The new required subfolders that you have inside of your root, inside of your main root for Unit 7 are going to be scripts, styles, and SRC. SRC is going to be any type of like visual image or visual media, like videos, pictures. I guess audio is obviously not a visual media, but if you have audio on your page, it would go in there as well. But these three are the key. A lot of rhyming today. These three are the key for the functionality of our page now that we're into all three of the mainline languages for web design. So you need a script subfolder, you need a place for your JavaScript to live, SRC for all your visuals for every file that's not HTML, and you need a style subfolder to keep your style sheets all in one spot. And you should be able to see the caption. Oh, okay. So same exact root folder setup, except now you are required to have a script subfolder inside of your Unit 7 root so that you can have a place for JavaScript. We're going to go File and then open up that folder. I'm in first period web design still. So if I go into second period web design, oops, that's my whole second period web design folder. I want to open up the Unit 7 root that I just created right down here. Select folder. There's nothing in it because we're about to put some stuff in it. So the three types of files that you're going to need to keep, I don't know where to put my captions. Put them up here. I'll put them right there. Okay, the three main types of files that you're going to need to have inside of your pages now for a fully complete dynamic web page. It's going to be HTML, CSS, and obviously JavaScript now in their specific locations. So we have our whole root folder selected. We have the big rectangle. We're going to create a new file. Call this one 7.1 index.html. Do not forget the .html before you hit enter. All right. Exactly the same HTML setup that we've been doing for like 5 units, so you guys know how to do it. I'm going to change the document title on line 7 to be JS, var, and variables and functions. Oops. Variables and functions like this. Just to truncate them, make them a little bit smaller. And we got nothing in the body to start off because we're going to put some stuff in there later on. Control S to save that. Now I'm going to go into my style subfolder like I'm used to. Solid click for a solid rectangle. Solid rectangle for subfolder. Right click on that and go to new file. Same deal, 7.1 style.css. And we'll link that here in just a second. And then the third and final time, this is the new one that we're doing now that we have JavaScript introduced to our language core. Right click on the scripts file, and we're going to call this one 7.1 main.js. JS is your JavaScript file extension so that you now have, if you look at your tabs, you can tell all three of these are related to assignment 7.1 because they've got that little not delineation, but they've all got a 7.1 in there. You can tell it's nice and easy to remember. The file extensions are they're all acronyms. So you guys will get real good at remembering these acronyms. All right, anyways, let's connect these files that we've created all back to our index page before we start doing any type of coding or any type of actually developing our page. We want to make sure all of our resources are connected as they need to. So I'm going to do a Zelda link like we're used to for the style sheet, like we've been doing. Just type link inside of the brain here. I usually put mine on line 7. Hit enter, and then I'm going to type out my style sheet, styles 7.1 style.css. Hit space, type equals text/css, the same way we've been doing it for like 5 units. I know you guys know how to do it. These are the 3 required pieces for a Zelda link. As long as you've got all 3 of those, it should be fully functional. I like to put, and I forgot to do this in first period, but I like to put a version number inside of my head container, and I like to quick comment that with my control ? Keyboard shortcut. So I'm going to type the letters V or the V1 right here on line 9, highlight that, ideally, highlight that, there we go, and control ? So that I know this is version 1 of this page that I am creating here. The new thing, because we're used to this so far, this is just regular style sheets, whatever. The new type of tag, the new type of connecting function that we're going to use here is the script tag, because that's going to bring our new JavaScript file onto this index page so that we can start creating some programming to make our page more responsive. And the tag for that, it's nice and easy to remember, is script, but not just script. We want script : src. Script source, okay? And I'm typing this not as a tag, because once I hit enter, it's going to become a tag with that cursor nice and easily placed inside of my src quotation marks. And in the same way that I link a style sheet with a href, or I link an anchor with a href, or an image with an src, it's exactly the same as it is on the other tags. So I'm going to start with my scripts subfolder first, and then my JS file is going to pop up, separated by a slash. And that is all I need to perform functionally the same process as a Zelda link to connect my JavaScript to my HTML file here. And right now there's nothing in them, which we'll get into here in just a second. But this is the setup that you'll need to perform in order to get all of your files talking to one another. I forgot to make a 7.1 index for or a homepage for this unit yet. We'll do that here in just a second. Okay. We've got our 7.1 assignment page created because it's got its own style and JavaScript file. I am now going to make my index page for my whole unit, my table of contents. So I'm just going to create a new regular old HTML file here. Call it 7homepage.html. And then I'm going to start this like a normal HTML file as well. But the only thing that's going to live on here are my anchor tags that connect all of my different assignments together. The only thing we need to anchor to the home page are the specific assignment pages. So I'm going to go A, enter. It's going to give me my href automatically with my start and end tags. And then I'm going to attach my 7.1 index HTML here and name this 7.1 so that I can access it when I open up the table of contents. Now I'll add a little H1 label here that says this is my table of contents. And now I've done all the Unit 7 root folder setup that I need with all of these specific files for the assignment that we're going to work on today and tomorrow. So I'm going fast because we've covered this already. You know that, and it's available for you later on. Let me change my document title actually to Unit 7 main page. And then we'll come back to this later once we have some more assignments. So I'm going to close this for now. It's just an anchor to 7.1 index because this is what we're actually working on and focusing on today. Hold on, I see a message in the chat. Jamie, I will get back to your comment here in just a second. Okay, so now that we've done the setup for Unit 7 roots, now let's talk a little bit about some of the JavaScript syntax, some of these rules of the language. You know, you wouldn't want to try to deliver a whole speech if you didn't know how to speak the language. We're going to talk about some of the rules required, specifically comments and console log, which are ways to keep track of your programs, ways to take notes on them as you're writing them. So to do that, you're going to want to go to your 7.1 main.js tab inside of your VS Code. And there's 2 ways that you can make comments in JavaScript. It depends on whether the comment is a single line comment, like this, or a multiple I have to space out the word line because it wants to turn it into an audio listener. Comment. But if these were both comments in my JavaScript file, there are two main ways that you can leave a comment. Single lines are going to be // that's a question mark, // like that. Anytime you have a single line comment in JavaScript, this is typically for something like assigning a variable or making a note on what step the program is executing, or, you know, small notes that you're taking inside of your program. You're going to use the // method to make a single line comment. Today is kind of like a note-taking day more than it is an actual like developing and exercising kind of way, because we'll have time for that tomorrow. Today's just kind of getting used to JavaScript, how it works, and getting a feel for the actual process of doing this new language that we're trying out here. Multiple line comments are exactly the same. Hold on, if I could type. The same as CSS. I'm going to do a lot of spaces here. CSS comments. So multi-line comments in JavaScript are going to be that /*, and then that */, exactly like they are in CSS comments. So we'll go /* again, and then */. JavaScript is a language that actually does benefit from spaces. I know so far that I've been kind of anti-spacebar when it comes to like naming your files or creating HTML elements or your specific CSS values. JavaScript is a language that you can have a little bit more space because it very quickly becomes a, I don't want to call it a mess, but it is a very visually busy coding language with all the different functions, variables, things interacting with one another. You can improve your readability, your legibility, by adding some extra spaces. So these are the ways that you leave single line and multi-line comments inside of your JS file. Another way to make comments, specifically in a realm of debugging, figuring out why your program's not working, or if anything is creating some type of error, is the idea of console.log. So if you remember yesterday, I think did I show you guys document write with the variables? It's a very similar process where we're going to type out console.log and then parentheses, and inside of those parentheses, quotes. Now what this does is it behaves almost exactly the same as document.write, but it's got a different function and a different destination that things are going to happen on it. So what this references, if we work backwards, this is going to reference the console as compared to the HTML document. So it's not visible as part of our viewers or our users' experience. It's going to execute the log command. So it's going to make some type of note or make some type of mark when something happens. And then whatever we put inside of these parentheses is what is going to be logged. So I'm going to put inside of my parentheses here, this is what is being logged, like this. And now I've completed a console log addition to my JavaScript. But what does that actually look like for the user, for the end goal? If we take a look at our HTML document here, there's nothing on it besides this script start and end tag. It's not an element because there's no text in between these here. Script is a weird one because it's an HTML element that functions without needing content in between the start and end tags. So if I were to go live on this HTML document that I've created here, there's nothing, right? We have not actually coded any visual information. We've not coded any instructions for our recipe to execute, but we do have a console log inside of the main JS. So if I right-click in my browser, I right-click in my white space, and I go down to inspect, I'm using Firefox, so mine's down here. If I click on inspect, it's going to pull open my dev tools, right? I'll move these captions over. I'm going to pull up my dev tools, and right to the right of the inspector is this thing called the console. So if I look at my console, you can see it spells out what I put inside of those parentheses. This is what is being logged. And then it tells me what file that's being logged from, as well as what line it is being logged on. So this is coming from my 7.1 main.js on line 11. So if I go to my file here, you can see that line 11 is what's creating my console log. And that's going to be what's appearing on my console inside of my debugger here. Or not my debugger, but inside of my website's sort of under the hood, not visual to the user, similar to kind of the head container. The console is what's being logged right here. Since I'm using live server, you can see that my index.html on line 41 has also made a note inside of the console that whenever I make a change, live reload is enabled. So what can we actually do with that is the question. This is where you would put if something is conflicting. Once we get into variables, let's say you set the variable of x to 2 different values, you can make a console log that says error, variables conflicting, program not executed, or something like that. It's just a way to keep track of your functions, keep track of your things like that, in a way, bless you, in a way that you can reference later on from the console. So what can we actually talk about with variables here? Variables, if we look at the, not that, if we look at the announcement for today, if you expand the replies, there's 2 links, one for variables and one for function basics. This is an excellent resource from W3 Schools that walks you through how variables can be a little bit confusing. Variables in JavaScript, at this point of our understanding, behave almost exactly the same as variables do in algebra, right? Or in just math in general. There are 4 main ways that you can declare a variable. We're going to focus on VAR for today, but there's also the word let, and this const is short for constant, which is a little bit misleading because it's not like a constant value that is consistent amongst all your programs or whatever. We'll get into that later. We're just going to focus on var for variable today. So right now, we have X, Y, and Z, which are undeclared. They have no data stored inside of them because variables are containers for storing data. What we can do inside of JavaScript is declare our variables like this by just typing out, X equals 5, kind of like a proof in geometry or algebra or whatever. You can set your variables by declaring them, X equals 5, Y equals 6, and then Z equals X plus Y. But it's a good idea to declare variables before you use them, as compared to just making a variable and then the variable comes after the function. You're going to confuse your JavaScript and create more work for yourself, which is ideally not what we're looking for, right? So because we've declared X equals 5 and Y equals 6, that means Z, because Z equals X plus Y, is going to store the value 11. So wherever you put the variable of Z in your JavaScript, it's going to interpret that as 11. This looks almost exactly the same as this because variable is a term mostly designed to use for older browsers. As you can see, it was used in all JavaScript from 1995 to 2015 until we introduced let and const. So fairly recently, actually, and you really only want to use variable when you're using code for older browsers. We're going to focus on variables so that you guys get an understanding of how it could work. And then we'll later on get into let and const because they're a little bit more confusing. So let and const, if we look at the try it yourselves compared to the variable try it yourself, I think that's const, that's var. Let's move that over here. And where did my let go? There we go. All right, so I'm just rearranging here. What we've got here inside of our script, let's ignore these tags and pretend that we're in the JavaScript file. What we've done is declared our 3 variables, and then we've used a command to, on the document, look for an element by the ID of demo within the HTML, and that's going to change that value, paragraph ID of demo, to be the value of Z is, and then we can add our function, we can add our mathematical expression. Because we've set a variable, it's going to make that function appear here. So let's copy that into our JavaScript file. I'm going to pop mine over to my other monitor real quick so you can just follow along with me. Okay. So we're in our JavaScript file on line 13 underneath console.log. Let's set some variables by typing var and then the name of our variable. This can be any name that you want. You can be your own name. It can be whatever you want it to be, but we're going to stick to variable of x equals 5, followed by a semicolon, and we're going to repeat that for y and z. Variable y equals 6, and variable z equals x plus y. Like this. We have declared our variables before we've started using any of them in any type of function. Now, the actual function that we're going to use is a get element by ID specific to the other HTML. So we're going to need to do that here in just a second. But variable x is 5, variable y is 6, and variable z is x plus y. Don't forget your semicolons after you've determined your variables. What we need to do now is give the HTML a target for our JavaScript to change, for our JavaScript to affect. That's one of the main things you can use JavaScript for, is changing HTML elements. So I'm going to find my way back to my 7.1 index, and then above my script here, so right underneath my body on line 12, mine's line 12, but it's the first line in my body container, I'm going to create a paragraph hashtag demo, okay? And then when I hit enter, that's going to auto assign this paragraph to an ID of demo, and it's going to add my start and end tags. Since there's no content, this is not an element yet, it's just a start and an end tag. If I go to my output, which should be here, should be around here. There it is. There's nothing here. We can see that our console log is still working. We look at our inspector and it'll open up the body tag. You can see that there's a paragraph ID of demo, but it's not appearing on the screen because we don't have any content actually written inside of our equation for the paragraph ID of demo. Now that you have a specific HTML element that your JavaScript can change, we're going to go back to the JS file and create a command that uses these variables to change that HTML element to something specific to our variables. So, how do we do all that? There's a lot of word soup. Okay. First, when you're thinking about variables in JavaScript at the most basic level, you need to tell it what you want it to focus on. In this case, we want it to focus on the HTML document, the visible part to the user. Next, we got to figure out what do we want it to do on that document. We want to look for the element with a specific ID. The ID is demo. All right. So we're going to go document dot capital G get capital E elements, capital B by capital I lowercase d. JavaScript is a very case sensitive language. So you have to be careful on what you're determining your variables and your functions. But most of the time, it's going to be using something called camel case. So let me talk about camel case real quick before we finish out that, that comment. We know uppercase, obviously. We know lowercase, obviously. But camel case is something that takes advantage of the way that spaces behave in coding languages. So just as a note, like as a side note, be patient with yourself while you're learning these development strategies because you are learning multiple languages with multiple different writing systems. That is going to take time, and that is going to be different than the way that you're thinking. You guys are all rewiring your brains at this point. So just give yourself some pat on the back, right? That's tough, especially at 10 in the morning, 9 in the morning. Anyways, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Camel case is where you use capital letters in replacement of spaces because it creates this sort of hump like a camel has inside of our functions here. And you can see that an example on the get element by ID. If I were to type out get element by ID, that is a completely different action than if I were to type it out with camel case like this. So if you want to keep these kind of as notes, just like as we're going along, you can write this out and it shouldn't affect any part of your JavaScript. Anyways, that's camel case. So when I'm talking about camel case, I mean using capitals instead of spaces. All right, so now that we've declared we want to focus on the document and we want to do something specific on that document, get the element by the ID, now we need to tell JavaScript what ID we actually want it to get the element by. And since we set it to demo in the HTML, I'm going to type that out, demo. It's got to be exactly the same case sensitive as it is on your HTML. So it's all lowercase there. All right. And the last thing we need is a little bit of extra information. JavaScript is a very sequential where you go command, extra info, extra info, extra info. The other piece of extra info that we need is inner lowercase, all caps, HTML. That means it's going to be referenced inside of the HTML document, specifically inside of the body container here. Okay, space equals. All right. This is where we set, now that we've given our JavaScript a very specific target to identify, this is where we start writing the things that change about that specific target. So I'm going to hit enter, quotes. This is what's going to become changed, just like we did on console log, as well as the get element by ID. The value of z is, and then semicolon. We're going to go outside of the quotes because now we're, instead of being something that appears on the screen, we're going to do some type of functionality. You add plus z because we've declared the variable z, and then a semicolon right after that. So this is a combination of variables and functions breaking down a very specific set of executables, because this is a set of instructions that the computer is going to do for us. It's going to execute these instructions. That's why programs are called EXEs. That's what it's short for. When I go back to my HTML page, since I'm running a live server, we know that the PID of demo is not actually having any content on the HTML page. However, if I go back to my output and I refresh, there's nothing there, of course. That would be too easy. Okay, let me figure out why that's not working. PID of demo, get element by ID demo. What went wrong here? Let me add some spaces between the X and the Y. See if that fixes it. Variable plus Z, semicolon. It's all good. Let me comment this out.
That'd be on 2 lines.
It can be on 2 lines, yes. Okay, let's try that. Hold on, time to debug. Welcome to JavaScript. It's still not working. Okay. Uncaught type error. Get element by ID is not a function, add anonymous. What's up?
Line is lowercase, it doesn't work.
Okay, let's try that.
No, don't do that.
Oh, now it works. Okay, yeah. My bad. So your lowercase, your G has to be lowercase. So yours should look like this. I'm gonna freeze my projector. I forgot I could do that. So your function from line 17 to line 21, if you're watching on the Zoom room, which should still be available, should look like this. All right. So when I go back to my, where did my Chrome? Oh, I closed it. Okay. So if I run this, go back to my run page and run this index page, you can see it took a lot of work to write a sentence that makes a simple arithmetic equation happen on our page here. So if I right click and I inspect, because now I'm in Chrome, if I go to my console, you can see that my console log is still working. If I hover over my, I take my magnifying glass, my little plus, or my little cube with an arrow, okay? This is p.demo, all contained within the HTML file, but it doesn't tell me where the actual function is happening, because that's going to be not in the console. Let me find, where's my scripts? It's fine. Anyway, so all of this is required to make our page just say the number 11. Close that debug. Okay. What we've done here to break it down is we've declared some variables and we've used a function to take advantage of those variables to make something specific happen on our page. This is the essence of JavaScript. Another of the more common ways that you can test a programming language is the hello world example. So I'm gonna type an H1 here that says JS variables and functions, like this. And then an H2 that says something like var plus specific instructions. All right, let's work on hello world. So by focusing on the document and by telling it to get an element by an ID, I can change the ID of those specific HTML elements as long as it references the inner HTML. So I'm going to set another paragraph p hashtag hello, and then hit enter. I'm just going to leave it as is because that's my target for my upcoming JavaScript. Okay, so I'm going to go underneath line 21, and I'm going to start a new function, specifically the document write function, that is going to make hello world appear on my page, which is kind of the universal practice of learning a new programming language. So just like I did document get element by ID, I'm going to do that same thing here. Document dot lowercase g, capital everything else. Camel case, you're going to start with a lowercase, get element by ID. And I'm going to put the ID inside of the parentheses. It's going to be hello. All right. And then we finish out by typing specifically to inside of the HTML. What we can do now is create something called an alert, like this, just the word alert. Inside of the alerts, whatever we put inside of the quotes will become a pop-up on our screen. It's going to be an alert on the page. So what this should do is on the document, get an element by the ID set to hello. And on the inner HTML, it's going to execute alert set to hello world. So if I go back to my index page and I run that, it's going to say hello world. There's not going to be any type of extra stuff inside of here. All right. We go back to our JavaScript folder. We go back to our JavaScript file, I mean. We can take off the alert and just leave the quotes so that it finds the element ID inside the HTML and changes it to hello world. So if I go back to my index page, P of ID is underneath my script file. So if I run this, I think I'm already running it. Let's refresh. Okay, so you might notice that hello world is not happening, but my value of Z function is still happening. And according to the document flow, because HTML goes from the top to the bottom, this means that this function is ahead, or this script is ahead of these two. That's because in the document order, the script happens before anything else below it that's not a normal HTML. Since I'm trying to execute a command on this ID of hello, because it's after the script, the JavaScript can't read it. So what I need to do is just right click on this, cut it, and then put it after at the very bottom of all of my specific HTML so that the script loads last and has all of the available information ahead of it to work with. The same way that we set the variables before we try to do a function, we provided JavaScript with the info it needed before it does the thing that we're asking it to do. So now if I go back to my output and I refresh, hello world is going to start appearing. Hello world appears after the H2s because that is its destination on the HTML document. So why document flow is important, and it's something that you need to keep in mind while we're kind of figuring out how this programming stuff works. Does this make sense? Even a little bit. Variables and functions are some of the core concepts of JavaScript, and it is what 7.1 is talking about. So if I pull up 7.1 on modules here. It's Unit 7, JavaScript January, assignment 7.1. What I'm asking you to do is mostly what we've just done. We've created a full web page with HTML, CSS, and JS inside of our Unit 7 root that contains a simple example of variables and functions. You guys may choose what the simple variables represent or what the simple function displays or changes on your page. There is some extra resources in the agenda. So if you go to the agenda for this week, or the thread for this week, click on Thursday. There's a functions basics tab here that's going to walk you through some details of functions. Your job is to create on your own web page, create an example of simple variables. I lost my tab. Hold on. Simple variable. Geez, where is it? There we go. There we go. Sorry. For the third time. Simple variables and simple functions that display or change something on your page. All right. We'll have time to work on this tomorrow as well. There's W3 schools all over the place about how you can use different JavaScript to do different cool things. I'll also be able to find some for you. But that's your goal for 7.1 is to write your first JavaScript program, just like this. All right. Does anybody have any questions on what I'm asking of you? Okay, the rest of the time is yours. If you want to get started on this, you will have more time tomorrow. But 7.1 is writing your first program, your first executable. Okay. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it.